Welcome back to the channel. This is Roberto with Full Curl Precision. For tonight's topic, the question, does bullet diameter, also known as caliber, automatically determine effectiveness? Well, yes and no. We'll get into it. For one, we're going to compare a couple cartridges, very common ones used and used all over the world, both successfully and somewhat unsuccessfully. It comes down to application. So here it is. Two of the most common cartridges in the hunting world that have been around a long time, that are tried and true, but also have been determined by some to be kind of overrated. Well, what are they? They are the 270 Winchester and the 308 Winchester. Both really good. Have had great success with both in my world of medium game hunting, and many around the world have had great success with that too. Numerous ones around here have been successful with these when it comes to hunting elk and even moose. There's numerous guys up in areas like Alaska and Canada that have used these successfully. But the question comes down to, does the bullet diameter itself, the actual caliber, determine its effectiveness? And the reality is, it depends. There's no simple, straightforward answer to it. See, if you're going to be using something like a 30 caliber, and you're going after mostly medium game, and we're talking about, for here in North America, the medium game can vary in size. So like white-tailed deer, for instance, depending on the part of the country you're in, you can be looking at deer that are 300 plus pounds and some that are barely 100 pounds. You know, if you're talking areas of like Florida or South Georgia or anywhere along that deep southern area, white-tailed deer aren't very big. So do you need a large caliber rifle to be very successful? Well, no. No, a lot of guys actually down south, because of how small the deer are, often use cartridges like 5.56, 223, 204 Ruger, 22 250. Just name it. 243. 243 has got a great following in the deer community as being low recoil and effective, and even dropping deer quite well. And so, if that's the case, then do you need something like a 308? Well, no. It becomes kind of an overkill cartridge. Now, is there anything wrong with having a bigger, more powerful cartridge in comparison to what you're using? Well, of course not. But the question isn't whether or not it's overkill. The thing is it more effective in that application? And I would have to say, in those applications, we are talking about a smaller framed animal. Let's say, you're talking about something that's going to be 150 pounds and under. So you're typically looking at smaller southern whitetails, Texas whitetails. You're talking Coues deer along parts of New Mexico, Arizona into Mexico, parts of Southern California. You're not going to be looking at a very large animal. Pronghorn. Those animals, they don't require a whole lot. So your cartridges, like your 6.5 Creedmoors, your 6 Creedmoors, your 243s, your 22 Creedmoors, 22 250, your 6 Arcs, things like that, they do a really good job, and they're perfectly fine. Because again, you're not talking about a big animal. So do you need a 308, a 30-06, 300 Win Mag, 300 Rum? No. No, as a matter of fact, you don't. Do you need to have, however, a larger caliber and larger cartridge once you step up your game into larger medium games, such as large northern whitetail, mule deer, caribou? Yeah, I would recommend stepping into something a little bit bigger. Why? Because again, those smaller cartridges kind of lose their effectiveness because your margin for error is less. And I'm not saying that it justifies taking garbage shots. That's not what I'm saying, so don't confuse that. What I am saying is that if you have a 10-inch, let's say a 10-inch target size on an animal, if your bullet is on the outside of that kill zone, and you have a more powerful cartridge, a more powerful cartridge and a larger diameter bullet, it's gonna be more effective at putting the animal down than a what I consider to be marginal cartridges and calibers. So regardless of how you feel, at 500 and 600 yards, a 300 Win Mag and 7 Rem Mag are going to be far more effective on large game like elk and moose than any 6.5 Creedmoor or PRC. End of story. This is not up for debate. This is a proven fact across the board. So when we're talking about cartridge selection, cartridge options, and effectiveness, you got to remember there's not a one size fits all, because at some point you have too much gun. And I get it. Obviously, there's no such thing as too dead. But the thing is, if your goal is to be able to take an animal and to fill your freezer and have good quality meat, if you're throwing away the front half of an animal because you took out both shoulders and there goes the rib cage, that's kind of useless. You want to be able to maintain something, even if you're not a big fan of shoulder meat, it makes really good burger. I mean, you don't have to make roasts or steaks out of it, but it is really good burger. So why not? That's how I hunt. I purposely avoid hitting the shoulders because I want to be able to recover as much meat off the animal as I possibly can. Doesn't mean I'm avoiding trying to hit the heart area. I'm just trying not to blow through the shoulder bones and blow them up. So that's really what I'm after. And mind you, I'm speaking for me. You hunt your style. You have to live with your own decisions. I'm not telling somebody how to feel or what to do. What I am saying is this: there's a balance to be had, and that's the thing about anything. Regardless of what people can promote, one idea, they can promote another idea. But ultimately, balance is the most important aspect. What it does is it allows you to look at a situation, analyze it, and go, yeah, I could probably get away with a smaller cartridge, but out of respect for the animal, I should use a slightly larger cartridge. But at the same time, if I'm hunting whitetails and I'm staying within 400 yards, it allows you to realize that maybe you don't need that 7 Rem Mag, 7 PRC, 300 Win Mag, 28 Nosler, 7mm Rum, 300 Rum, 338 Lapua. It kind of creates this thing where you have to balance it out. And I would say, and anyone who's been doing this a long time knows, shot placement means more than anything else. But at the same time, it's important for that bullet to do its job when it gets there. So that there's the balance, right? Obviously, shot placement is going to be the most important aspect, but it's not the only aspect. Because even a well-placed shot from a marginal cartridge is going to be a slower death on an animal than a well-placed shot from a much larger cartridge. That's a reality, and that's not up for debate. That's not something we're going to be going back and forth on. These are straight facts. And, I'm a strong believer in also reasonable ranges and also reasonable cartridges. I believe in Idaho, unless that law has changed. We haven't lived there for a little over a couple years now. But when we were there, last I'd seen, there is a maximum weight of rifle allowable. And I believe it's like 16 pounds, something like that. What they're trying to do is encourage hunters to use hunting cartridges and hunting rifles. Basically, while still using, very ethical cartridges, 300 Remington, 300 Win Mag, 300 Weatherby, so on and so forth. What they're looking to do is keep it limited to a lot of those types of cartridges as well. I can't remember what the minimum was, and it's been a while. But what they're trying to do is avoid guys going in with like a 416 Barrett or a 50 BMG or a 375 Shytac and taking shots at a mile on an elk. What they're trying to do is encourage more ethical hunting ranges. And I get that. So they're not telling you your exact cartridge or scope or anything like that. What they are saying is don't get too ridiculous with it. We don't want this turning into a some sort of insanity. And that makes sense. Montana itself doesn't have any minimum or maximum requirements. What they do say is use sound judgment and match your cartridge to your game. What they're doing is they're leaving it up to you to actually use your brain cells, which is important. You should be, that's part of it too. It's just like, well, I shoot this, 223 or 5.56 or 204 Ruger really well on coyotes. I should be able to take this and go hunt elk. No, it's not because you're not accurate with it. But the fact is, if you look at the vast majority of bullet selection for the 204 Ruger or 223 or 5.56, they're not really built well to handle heavy muscle, heavy bone. They're just not that. Well, I can take a headshot. Okay, fine. But are you keeping your shot distance to within 100, 150 yards? So there's a balance, right? If you're one of those guys that all you're going to do is get it set up in a good spot and you're going to brain pan an elk, good luck with that. I'm being serious. I hope it works out for you, because I know a lot of guys that actually do that. They're not out there with big rifles. They know they're ridiculously accurate. They get into a good position. They get close, and they brain pan a cow elk. And she goes straight down, no meat damage. So cool. I actually respect that. But here's the thing: if you talk to the guys that actually do that type of hunting, they actually take the time to be that accurate. They're loading their own rounds, or if they find a really good factory round, they're practicing, and they're practicing a lot. They're not out there just shooting 1 or 2 rounds and then going out and trying to do this. No, they're going out and they're practicing by setting up things like golf balls at 150 yards. Okay? That's what they're doing. They're making sure that they can actually hit the shots that they're looking to achieve. Those guys I respect, and I would never try to interfere with those guys because they actually take the time to be good. Therefore, I respect their choice to take that out and go do that. But if you're like most folks, you know what? You're probably working a 9 to 5, or you're working longer than that, or whatever the case is. You're busy. You got family responsibilities. You got all sorts of other things going on, and you maybe, if you can get to the range once or twice a month, if that, maybe you're out there only 3-4 times a year, and you're just putting out a few rounds. Don't take a small cartridge. Take something a little better. At the same time, you want to be comfortable, right? So don't go for the hardest hitting. Oh, I want to be able to have a lightweight rifle, and you pick something that has a pencil thin barrel, no muzzle brake or suppressor, and you're using some crazy Magnum like a 300 Rum. You want to talk about an unshootable rifle? They really are. There's no fun in those. So this is where balance comes in. Again, your cartridge or your caliber does not automatically determine your effectiveness. It all depends on what you're hunting, your distances, and what you're trying to achieve. So use some common sense, think about it, do some research. And it's okay. You can ask questions. You want to ask a question down in the comments? I'm willing to answer it. There's actually, I even have a community setting on that you can actually ask questions on, like, what's it called? YouTube studio. You can post, your questions there. There's a whole bunch of knowledgeable guys that I happen to be in touch with. They're happy to answer questions. Yeah. So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're new to this, we're always willing to help. But at the same time, don't automatically assume just because it has a fatter bullet that it's going to be more effective. Sometimes the faster, sleeker bullet is going to be more effective on those slightly lighter animals. Because, and I went over this in a video last night, it all comes down to also bullet construction. But here's the thing. Heavier, slower moving bullets require more muscle mass to make them expand and do a better channel. So you might find out that something like a 270 or 6.5 PRC with their bullet construction and something in the 140 grain bullet is gonna drop a whitetail or a mule deer a lot faster than Grandpa's 30-30 with a 170 grain bullet. So, but then again, it may not, because you might be shooting that mule deer at only 50 yards. And if you're doing that, then it really doesn't matter, because you're talking such a close range that all three of those options are going to be just fine. So it's figuring it out based upon your needs, your application, your hunting style. Don't think that there's a one size fits all. It's like the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none, but it's better than being a master of one. So there are a lot of jack of all trades type cartridges out there. And so you can find those. They're fairly affordable. They're common. They're easy to shoot. If you want to have something like that, I highly recommend something like that, because they are versatile. So that's going to be like your 308, your 30-06, your 270. I'll throw in the 6.5 Creedmoor. I'll throw in the 6.5 PRC. 7 Rem Mag, 300 Win Mag are in there, but they're on the very top end, like really large. There's going to be some others. 280 Remington, 280 Ackley Improved, 7mm 08. That's a good one. 7mm 08. 243s on the smaller end of that jack of all trades. So you want to be cautious as to your bullet selection. The smaller your caliber and the lighter your bullet, the more picky you need to be about your exact bullet construction. That's going to make a big difference. With a slightly larger diameter, you can get away with a little bit more. So finding that balance, learning how to shoot it, how to be effective, how to be responsible, and also being realistic. If you're not comfortable shooting past 200, I don't care what you have. Don't shoot past 200. Don't let somebody pressure you into doing something that would be unethical. You need to be ethical and responsible. Self-regulation is the best thing you can do, and don't let people bully you into doing anything else. So, does bullet diameter automatically determine effectiveness? The answer is no. I appreciate all the support. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, and we'll talk to you again.